Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to the very first episode of The Contented Narrative. So, if there are any teething problems, please do bear with me. Now, within these episodes, I will be comparing book narrative and film narrative and how well they portray our beloved novels onto the big silver screen. Now, episode one is the fantastic thriller that is The Girl on the Train. Now, The Girl on the Train was a brilliant thriller that was brought out by Paula Hawkins in 2015, and it was put through onto the screen no later than 1 year later in 2016. Now, I will be scaling each adaptation on 5 major things: character representation, setting, for example, the place and the time, the plot, if the film is good in its own right, and the overall adaptation from book to film. So the first thing that I will be rating is character representation. But just before I do that, please bear in mind that there will be spoilers within this episode. So there are 6 major characters within The Girl on the Train. You have Scott and Megan, you have Tom and Anna, and you have Kathy and the main character, Rachel. Now, the book is told from mainly Rachel's perspective, but also that of Megan and Anna. Now, the film does stay with those characters as the narrators of the film, but they do stick primarily with Rachel as they do with the book. Now, book representation of Rachel. She's an alcoholic. She is desperate. She is unhealthy in her lifestyle and within herself mentally. She is jobless. She also, as you find out later on in the film and the book, that she is also barren. Now, you do also find out that she is quite selfish within herself, and she does hate herself in that respect, but she can't quite get out of this self-hating spiral. So she does try to do better, but at times you sort of see her backslide. Now, the film does present Rachel as very much the same character. However, they do have her as more of an angrier version of Rachel. She's a lot more prone to conflict. And at one point as well, she goes to AA meetings. Now, in the book, she goes to a therapist, but she never goes to AA. But in the film, she goes to AA and a therapist. Now, you've got number 2 is Megan. Now, she's also sort of the semi-titular character, as it were. Now, she is an insomniac. You find out that she can't sleep due to past trauma that she's had. She's also seeing a therapist as well, and she's very unsettled in her life and who she is. So she was at one point a owner of a gallery, and then she became jobless. She then starts working as a nanny for Anna, but then doesn't continue with that. And she's got a lot of pressure from everybody being like, well, you need to be the perfect wife, you need to find someone to work, you need to have a child. She feels sort of broken within herself. She is also adulterous. Now, you get hints throughout the book and the film that she's sleeping with her therapist. You come across that as well because you have Rachel who sees Megan kissing the therapist on the night before she disappears. But it's never actually said if she is actually having an affair with her therapist, but it does say that she is having an affair, and we will find out later on in this episode who that is with. So the representation on screen is very much the same as the representation on book. But on the screen, you do see a bit more of her life outside of the home, and you do see a little bit more of what's driving her, even though within the book you have got that inner monologue going on. On the film, you sort of see her more interacting with other people. Then you have Anna. Now, Anna is the woman that Rachel's ex-husband left her for. So Rachel's ex-husband was having an affair with Anna. So she is a mistress and then becomes a wife. She is primarily a housewife and a mother. She has a beautiful baby little girl. She's very strung out though, because she's very threatened by Rachel. She finds Rachel a force that keeps interacting with her perfect life, as it were. So you see her blissfully happy with Tom, but you also see her fed up with the way that Tom keeps making exceptions for Rachel's behaviour. So in the film, you do see this a lot. You see this representation of her on the screen, which is very much the same as the book. She's very much in boxes. She's a mistress, then she's a wife, then she's a mother. She doesn't really do anything outside of her child and her husband. Then you have the two men in the book. You have Tom and you have Scott. Now, Scott is Megan's husband, and Tom is Anna's husband and Rachel's ex-husband. So you have Book Scott. Now, he is jealous, he's overbearing, he's very emotionally and hinted at physically abusive within his relationship, but he is also very wistful of what was with him and Megan, and he's very wistful of the love that they have shared, and he wants to build a family, and he puts that pressure on Megan quite a lot. Now, film Scott, you do see all of his bad characteristics. You see his abusiveness, you see the fact that he is very aggressive and he's very overbearing, and you hear from Megan that he's constantly checking on what she does, where she goes, who she's with. But they don't show any of that love that he has for Megan, and they don't show any of the wistfulness that he has for their relationship that you do primarily see in the book as well. So you really get all of the bad and none of the good with Scott. But he is also a very misleading character. So you think you're seeing one thing and then you see the other. So it is sort of like, oh, you don't see what you think you're seeing, which is great by Paula Hawkins. Now, the other man in the book is Tom. Now, Tom is, as I mentioned before, Rachel's ex-husband and Anna's current husband. Now, in the book, you see that he's very loving and besotted with his new family. And he also has a little bit of love for Rachel because obviously he still loves who she was, and he puts up with a lot of what she does when she's drunk, calling him and coming over and trying to get him to interact with her, basically. Now, you still get that in the book, and you also get that he is a very good liar. He's a very, very good liar, and he is a cheater. He is a full-on cheater. So you get that in the film. You get that he's the liar and he's the cheater because you see him cheating on Rachel with Anna, but then you see him cheating on Anna with Megan. That's right. So the person that Megan is having an affair with is Tom. So you see that, and you see the fact that he's got all these bad characteristics, and he's got a very sinister undercurrent going through the book that you pick up on now and then, but you don't really see until the final confrontation, as it were, between the characters. Whereas in the film, you get this sinister overtone throughout the entire film. So you get it from the beginning right to the end. You get this feeling that something's not quite right. Now, finally, you come across Kathy. Now, in the book, she's more sort of like a background character, but she's very kind to Rachel. She puts up with a lot from Rachel. She's sort of like a one-time friend that sort of let Rachel crush her for a little bit, and then 2 years later, Rachel's still there. She finds out eventually in the book that Rachel is jobless, but then instead of kicking her out and going, that's it, I'm done, she puts in place a series of steps that Rachel can follow. And she's very much a kill you with kindness kind of character. She's almost like a martyr within herself. Whereas in the film, she's the biggest change, I think. Because in the film, she's a very strong, domineering character that knows everything that's going on in Rachel's life. That's sort of like, right, that's it. On the final straw, you're done. That's it. I can't help you anymore. She's sort of like for herself and then nobody else. And I think that's not quite who Kathy was. Kathy was the pushover who was a little bit firm, but at the end of the day, you knew you could get away with a lot with her. So for all of this, the overall character representation, I find, was very close to the book. They had a lot of the main points. They kept a lot of the interactions sort of between the characters and how you find the characters quite similar. So I would like to give that part a 7 out of 10. So next up is the setting. Now, this is a massive difference. So in the book, it's set in London, and Rachel is going to and from the city on a train. And as well as looking for jobs in the library when she travels, you sort of see her on the street as well. But it is set in London. However, the film, for some unknown reason, got moved all the way to New York City. Now, there's no particular reason, we don't know, it's just in New York City rather than London. Now, I'm a Londoner myself, and so I was really looking forward to seeing London on screen. I know it's on a lot of films that London is shown, but I love pointing out, being like, oh, I've been there, I know that, and feeling like I was within that narrative. So the fact that they took it from London and put it to New York for no apparent reason really kind of took me out of the film a bit. And so for that reason, I'm not entirely happy with where it was set. When it was set was pretty much exactly the same timeline. It was around like the mid 2000s, so it's like 2013, 2014. So I will give that overall a 3 out of 10. Now we're on to the plot. Now, the plot obviously is the biggest part of any film to book narrative. You find that even if they don't quite get the characters right, or they move it to a slightly different city, or they put it in a slightly different time period, you still find if they don't have the basic plot, and if they don't have the same sort of beginning, middle, end, that's it. You sit there and you judge it and you go, no, I'm done. Now, it was very similar, the book and the film. You tend to find that it is hard to put across a full plot of any book and to keep the audience riveted. So most films do opt for the most basic plot points. They'll pull them out. So you'll have the beginning, how it starts. You'll have if there was a murder, who gets murdered. They tend to keep close. And who does the killing. Again, they tend to keep quite close. But obviously both the film adaptations tend to miss some of the subtler points of the narrative when they're just picking up on the major plot points. Now, both the film and the book do start exactly the same. It starts with Rachel commuting to and from a job that she doesn't have, pretending that she's on her way to work, and on the way back every morning, she's drinking on the train. Now, in the film, she's drinking, I think she's swigging like vodka straight from like a little sippy bottle. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't drink spirit straight up out of a bottle. But in the book, it's more pre-mixed gin and tonics. She'll drink a bottle of wine. It's more things that you can sort of drink, not socially, but do you understand what I mean? Sort of like, so you can drink it going on a train and nobody's really going to judge you. So I do feel like they did change a little bit there, but they did keep the fact that she was chucking it back on her train journey quite similar. And she can see these two houses, the house that was hers and the house that belongs to, as she calls them, Jess and Jason, that we then find out is Megan and Scott. So you still see that. Now, we do get an insight to sort of like how broken she is. Now, we get the insight a little bit quicker in the film with the fact that she was barren and she's been left by her husband and he cheated on her. In the book, it does take us a little bit longer to realise that she started drinking because she was barren, and then her relationship fell apart, and then she ended up moving in with Kathy. So you do get there quicker with the film, and you do find out quicker why Tom cheated on her and then left her. So the book and the film both do deal with quite well the tension between Rachel and Tom's new family. Now, I do find that in the film, Rachel's anger and the tension is more towards Anna, but in the book, she tends to keep it more towards Tom. So she'll contact Tom a lot more. But in the film, she was contacting Anna quite a lot. And at one point as well, we see her visualizing smashing Anna's head against the brick wall, which she never thought of. She wasn't an angry person. She felt neglected and cheated out of her life rather than, I want to go and beat someone's head in. So that is a difference there. Now, in the film, there does seem to be more between the two women, as I said. Now, you still get the fact that Megan and Rachel and Anna, so Megan never meets Rachel, but Megan babysits for Anna. So Anna knows Megan, but Anna also knows Rachel. So you do get sort of like that interconnectivity between the characters, and that is portrayed well on screen, the same as it is in the book. You do see flashbacks rather than actual inner monologues of what's going on in their lives and how they're feeling. And I do understand that it is quite hard to do sort of like monologues running over each character. So the film producer does do it the film director, sorry, does do it a little bit at the beginning where you sort of like hear them talking about themselves, but then it'll show more flashbacks than monologues, which I understand. I do. You're more likely to watch something than you are to listen to something sometimes. So you do have that, which is understandable, which is how they've portrayed that. So you also get the insight to the male characters. The crux of the insight is around how the women view them. So in the book, it's how the women view Tom and Scott. It's Megan sees Scott as an abusive and manipulative guy, but still loves her. But then you see Scott from Rachel's point of view, and Rachel really feels for him and feels sorry for him and feels like he's been betrayed because she knows what it's like when someone cheats on you. And again, from Tom's point of view, you see him through Rachel and Anna's eyes. You never really see Tom and Scott as their own characters. And I think this is very clever of Paula Hawkins, because it doesn't really give them a voice. It gives the more what's the word I'm looking for? It focuses more on the women of the story than the men. So I think that is again beautifully shown on the film as it is in the book. So now we are aware that Megan's timeline is running slightly ahead to Rachel and Anna's timeline. So you see Megan in the build-up, because in Rachel and Anna's timeline, you've got Rachel seeing this perfect couple that she sees once a morning and on the evening of Jess and Jason, which are, as I said before, Megan and Scott. And then she finds out that she's disappeared. And then she finds out, consequently, that Megan is dead. So that's Rachel and Anna's timeline. They're sort of seeing that as we are, whereas Megan's is running slightly ahead, because then it'll show how she comes to be to that point that we pick up in the other story. So that is the same on film as it is in book. Now, in the book, the disappearance and the investigation obviously take a little bit longer, and it does go into more detail. So you do see Rachel desperately trying to help Scott. She doesn't believe that he killed her. She believes that he's been misinterpreted, that, because she saw Megan kissing another guy the night before she disappears, she wants to tell Scott, she wants to let Scott know that he's not alone and he's suffering, basically. So she instigates herself more into Scott's life in the book than she does in the film. And you also see as well this relationship that Rachel and Scott get together. They sort of like, they get to know each other, and through his mourning and everything, at one point they sleep together in the book. But then he finds out exactly who she is, and that she's an alcoholic, and that she's Tom's ex-wife, sorry. And it's sort of, you get that up and down. And at one point, Scott absolutely loses his temper, and Rachel fears for her life and thinks that she might be wrong about who Scott is. Now, you don't really see that as much in the film. You see that she's instigated herself into Scott's life, but then not in the same way. So you see the fact that she's given away this information and everything, but then he comes to visit her home more often than he does in the book. And he finds out a lot quicker who she is, and he confronts her a lot quicker. And she tries to put in a restraining order, going, "Oh, Scott's, basically just try to kill me," she thinks. And the police just don't take her seriously, because they think she's an alcoholic. But in the film, at the beginning, you see the main suspects are Scott, and then you find out about the therapist who is always not sleeping with Megan. And they're the two main suspects in the book. And then that's it. But in the film, you've got Scott, you've got the therapist, but also for some reason, the police seem to think that Rachel is a viable suspect as well. Whereas in the book, so they see her more as a drunk and an unreliable witness, and just someone that sort of like they should pity, really. And they don't actually see her as a viable suspect. So that sort of like, I do find that the fact that they see her as a suspect in the film, I understand why they'd see her as a suspect in the film, because she is an angrier character. She's got that video on her phone at one point saying that she's going to go off and kill Anna. and Anna and Megan are quite similar in looks. But obviously I liked the fact that in the books they never really took her seriously, and that she sort of like got this blackout of the night that it happened, and she's trying to figure out within herself, could she have done something? Did she see anything? You know, and she's trying to figure that out within herself, whereas the police are sort of just laugh her off, as it were. Now, when it comes out that Megan has in fact died or been murdered, as we know, I think that everything comes rather too quickly in the film. So you find out that Megan's died, and then literally 2 seconds later, you find out who killed her, and you find out why they killed her. Whereas in the film, you find out that she's died, and then there's still that underlying of who did it, why did they do it, when did it happen, what did Rachel see? And it's sort of like that slow build to the finale that I really, really enjoy. That sort of got me sitting there going, oh, who did do it? Because I am a massive fan of whodunits. I'm a massive fan of murder mysteries. And I absolutely adore trying to figure out who the killer was, why they did it, and how they did it. But this had me stumped pretty much until the end. I mean, I must admit, I probably twigged when they were expecting me to twig. So you find that Rachel tries to get back her memories of that night. Now, in the film, it happens really quickly, whereas in the book, it's a slow build. So she'll remember one little piece of information. She'll remember somebody walking off to somebody's car, and she thinks it's Anna. Turns out it's Megan. Then she'll remember seeing something and hearing something and being somewhere. And it's that slow build that really gets you on the edge of your seat. I don't know about you guys, but I was sat there going, what did she see? Who did she see? And trying to figure it out within myself. Now, you find that because of this in the film, like, so Rachel and Anna have come to sort of like a boiling point, and Anna has decided that she's now going to go to the police. Now, she goes to the police in the book as well, but in the film, when she goes to the police go, there's nothing I can do. You're going to have to find proof that it's Rachel that's calling. You're going to have more proof, basically, before I can do anything about Rachel. So Anna goes on a little sleuthing expedition, and she finds a phone, but the phone belonged to Megan. And that's when you find out that Tom was cheating with Megan. Whereas in the book, the reason why Anna goes on like this little sleuthing expedition is because Tom has lied about seeing Rachel. He previously said, I talked to Rachel, and then he let slip later that he saw Rachel. And so because of this, and this alone, Anna realizes that he's actually quite a good liar, like a really good liar, because he lied to Rachel about sleeping with Anna. So it got her thinking, what else is he lying about? So she goes on a snoop. She then finds the phone. She then figures out that there is something more there, and that Tom was sleeping with Megan. But in both the book and the film, she throws away the phone and she just wants to remain oblivious. She doesn't care. She's just happy that she's still got the husband and she's still got the baby. So in the film, as I said, you get to it quite quickly where Rachel remembers what she does. And in the book, it takes her a little bit longer. And as she's starting to remember, she also gets this feeling that what she's remembering about that night isn't just that night either. So you find out that actually all those times that she's been blackout drunk, and Tom said, oh, you hit me with a golf ball, what is it, putter? Bat? I don't know. I don't know golf. So you've hit me with a golf club. And she goes, oh, I'm so sorry. And she'll apologize for things that she's not entirely sure that she's done. Now, in the book, when she finally starts to remember, she finally starts to get these back, she gets this underlying fear every time she's remembering something, and she can't quite figure out why. And then when she finally regains her memory, she realizes that the reason she's feeling that is because it was Tom. Tom was the one that was physically abusive. Tom was the one that was telling her she'd done this stuff and she hadn't. He was the one that had come at her with a golf club. He was the one that had thrown things and shouted and screamed. But then because she was drunk, he said it was her. So she always felt like there was something wrong with her. And I mean, she's still an alcoholic, but she realizes that a lot of the stuff that she's being told she's done, she hasn't actually done. So you find this out, and when she realizes that the person she was seeing getting into the car was Megan getting into Tom's car, she realizes that Anna and the baby are basically in trouble. So she goes racing over there, and she basically says to Anna that they need to get out. They need to get out as soon as they can. So Anna doesn't want to go, doesn't believe, says she's hysterical. And then Tom comes home. In the film, he's already in the house. In the book, he comes home and he then admits to what he's done. Quite calmly, yep, I killed her. I killed Megan. Now, obviously you weren't expecting that in the book at all. In the film, it was a little easier to guess because of the sinister slant that the director was giving Tom. So anyway, so you get this big reveal that Tom's the killer, and Rachel basically ends up trying to run from him and then killing him with a corkscrew. Anna assists Rachel at this point because realizes that the baby won't be safe, and she cares about the baby more than she cares about herself. So she then goes off and helps Rachel end Tom. When she's done that, they both sort of make a pact and they go, right, we're not going to talk about this anymore. They become allies, not friends, but allies in the killing of Tom. So then at the end of the film and the book, they both go off with their own lives and they live their own lives. So you find with the book, obviously Rachel's then got herself back together and she goes off on her travels and she finally gets herself back on track. In the film, she gets herself back on track, but she's sort of still in the same area. So that's sort of the plot. The plot has remained majoritarily the same. There were a few little instances and nuances. The big differences, however, is that I find that the police aren't as good in the film as they are in the book. In the book, as I said, they don't take her seriously. In the film, they do. But in the film as well, they're the ones that spill the information to the roommate that Rachel's jobless. And they're almost meddling rather than trying to sort something out. And I feel like this isn't a true representation of their part in the story. Another difference was that you come across Rachel's mum, who sort of like wants to be there for her and at the end ends up giving her a lot of money and is able to help Rachel get back on her feet. But in the film, for some unknown reason, they give a bigger part to Tom's boss's wife, of all people, and she's the one that basically tells Rachel that Tom's not a nice person. He's got anger problems. He got fired from his job for putting it around, basically. And it's sort of like, for me, that takes away part of the thrill of the book, because the book, you are sitting there and you're getting these revelations as Rachel's remembering things that actually happened. You're there with her. Whereas in the film, it felt like a bit of a cheat because you've got someone else telling her, yep, no, it wasn't you, it was him, it was always him. And then that's how she then starts to remember that night. So I wasn't exactly happy with how they did that. So, I mean, due to the plot in its most basic parts remaining very close to the book, and as I said, just leaving a few nuances out and introducing a few little bits that maybe shouldn't have been there, I'm happy to give it a 6 out of 10 for a book to film adaptation. Now, the next one is obviously, does the film stand up in its own right? I wasn't as big of a fan of this film as I was the book. Now, as a standalone film without reading the book, it does have a good plot. It is well cast, and the thriller part isn't as defined in the film, but as a rainy day afternoon, it is a good film. As a rainy day afternoon film, and if you don't know that much about the book, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. You can happily watch that with your partner and be happy. Or your friends. Don't necessarily have to be a partner. Overall, the final rating that I'm going to give is how good it was portrayed on the silver screen. So to me, the film felt a bit rushed and disjointed. As I literally just read the book, it missed a few points to me that seemed to really make the book the fantastic thriller that it is, including the slow building of Rachel's memory and her epiphany regarding her ex. So the book I will reread 100 times over. I've already read it about 3 times. I will definitely be reading it again. As you can see, I've got quite a few books. I've read pretty much all of them, and I have reread pretty much all of them. So the film once was enough for me. For that reason, I will give it a 5 out of 10. So those are my ratings, and this is obviously my own opinion. Of course, I'm happy for any of you, if you agree or disagree, just leave it in the comments below and I'll happily read those. And if there are any film to book adaptations that you would like me to review, do leave it below in the comments. So join me next time for my contented narrative around a series of unfortunate events. But until then, keep it contento.